Good morning, everyone. I am Joni Robbins, and I am the Purchasing Director for the North Carolina Department of Transportation. And it is my honor to present to you your training today. So, since I am NCDOT, I like to start talking about the different divisions and business units within DOT. Most people know about DMV, of course, that's always, and of course, the highway sections. But within NCDOT, we also have aviation, we have ferry, we have rail, we do the turnpike. We also have global transport, and we have the ports of North Carolina, and we also have what we call integrated mobility. So today, what we are going to talk about in this course are what you see here. We're going to talk about the rules of state purchasing, how you register with the state. We're going to talk about the electronic vendor portal or EVP. We are going to talk about some purchasing methods, go through seeking competitions, solicitation methods, evaluations, and the award process, and how do we do contract monitoring. So in this first section, we are going to cover rules and laws. What's the difference between the two as it pertains to purchasing for the state? We're going to talk about goods and services, what's considered a good and what's considered a service. What do you mean when you say delegation? And what about policy? And we are going to talk about in this section the different types of contracts. So this is a hierarchy that I like to share in terms of how purchasing rules are lined up for the state. So first, at the highest level, we have the North Carolina General Statutes, which is really laws that are put in place. And from those laws, we have administrative code, which are really the rules for enacting the laws. How do we do? So here's the law. How do we do that? How do we get that done? And then from the administrative code, we have a North Carolina procurement manual, and it really identifies the course of action the agencies will use in following the rules, like how are they going to follow the administrative code. And then the Department of Administration has the Purchasing and Contracts Division, and for non-IT, and IT has a statewide procurement office as well. And both of those overarching organizations have procurement manuals for their particular section, either IT or non-IT. And that's really the big high level procurement manual for the state. And then within each agency, they have their own purchasing manual in terms of procedures, how you're going to complete the task. So the tasks are more identified at the procurement manual, North Carolina procurement manual level. And then for each agency, NCDOT has a procurement manual, and it really talks, it's really a more procedural processes, how we going to make sure we follow the rules that are in place for the state. The purchasing authority for the state, I start with for non-IT, as I just mentioned, at the Department of Administration, there is a Division of Purchasing Contracts, and then for non-IT goods and services, their authority can be found in General Statute Chapter 143 under Article 3, and in the Administrative Code book, it is found in Title 1 and Chapter 5. For IT purchases, goods or services, they are located, the General Statute 147 covers those, and then Administrative Code would be found in Title 9, Chapter 6. I also add the state construction because, of course, this is for either the construction, renovation, or alteration of physical property belonging to the state. The general statute that governs how they do that in terms of procurement can be found in the chapters that are listed there, as you can see. And also, state construction also have their own manual that talks about the procedures and processes that they will use in following the rules for the state. So who are your potential customers for the state? What opportunities do you have to work with the state? And so we have 28 executive state agencies. We have 58 community college. There are 16 public universities and over 2,500 public and charter schools in the 100 counties in the state, and plus over 500 municipalities. So there are, uh, as you can see, a lot of opportunity to provide goods and or services to the government of North Carolina. And I like to show this chart simply because this is a listing of state agencies and support organizations for the state. And in that right column type of agency, you know, if it says cabinet beside it, that agency, then that agency head is appointed by the governor. And the ones that say council, those are the agency heads that are elected when we do elections, and then we also listed the support organizations below those. So let's get into some procurement. So when you say need identification, what are we talking about? And so for us or any for the North Carolina Department of Transportation, or really any of the agencies, they are asking these kinds of questions to their end users. So when you come to purchasing, I really need to know what you're buying, how much does it cost, does the division have the funding, right? We got to have money. And how do we buy? What process are we going to use? And then what type of documentation do we need to have in place for that? And so my staff, my team, purchasing procedures, you know, is determined really about, again, what are you trying to buy and how much does it cost? Those are the initial questions that we're going to be asking, right? Are we talking about a good? Are we talking about a service or both? Are there any delegations in place? Like, are there any purchasing limits that is related to the good or service that you're trying to buy? And are there any mandated resources in place, or are we going to do this on the open market? And I'll talk a little bit about both of those in a moment. And also, are there any special circumstances around this purchase? So those are the questions that we are going to be asking the staff. And when we talk about goods and versus services, so goods are all commodities, like tangible product property that you can actually touch. And those are also subjected to that 1.75% charge. And those are just some examples. Something, you know, we buy automobiles for the state. We buy office equipment, office supplies. And so these are tangible things really that you can touch and feel and be able to do something with. Versus when we talk about service, we're talking about something that's intangible. It's a task that's performed by an individual that requires specialized knowledge, some type of expertise, or a vendor who's had similar capabilities that we're asking for. An example of that is the plumber that you see here, or the power washer. You know, these are all services types of things. When we talk about mandated resources, we are really talking about before we buy, we got to first, and this is applicable to all state agencies, community colleges, and in some instances, the university as well. So first we got to determine, are there any mandatory state term contracts out there? We're going to talk about state term contracts in more depth in just a moment as well. But is this good in a service that we're trying to purchase, is it available through any of the entities that are listed here? Can we get it through Correction Enterprise? Is it something that's in surplus? Is this something that can be done through the construction office? Are there any memorandums of understanding existing between agencies with regard to the service that we are trying to do? When we talk about statewide term contracts, it's really a contract that's established for non-IT. It's established at the level of for division of purchasing contracts. If it's an IT statewide term contract, it's established by the statewide IT procurement office. And it's used by all agencies unless you exempt it by some type of general statute or rule or special circumstances. And these statewide term contracts can be either mandatory or convenience. If it's mandatory, it means that the governmental agencies have to buy their product, that particular product, good or service that they're doing through that contract, unless that vendor cannot meet the quantity or the delivery date of what you're trying to buy. If the state term contract is marked as being a convenience contract, then it's at the discretion of the agency as to whether they use it or not. They could buy it off a state term contract, or they can do an open market or a solicitation, if you will, for it. These are searchable on both purchasing contracts and DIT websites. So you can go out and see what statewide term contracts are already there. It's an opportunity. When you see one that is in place for the good and or service that you would like to offer the state, then I will go out and look at it and see when the next time it will be resolicited, and so that you have an opportunity to bid on being listed on the statewide term contract. That's a great opportunity. And of course, the thought behind the state term contracts is that these offer lower prices, good quality products, and delivery times are shorter. When we talk about open market, we are talking about doing a purchase according to the rules and regulations, where there's no mandatory resource in place. So we're actually going to post a bid, and I think that's a solicit a bid, and that's more commonly known by a solicitation, right? And also talk about delegation in terms of so this is about dollar amounts, right? So for most agencies, state agencies, community colleges, there is a $50,000 delegation. While many of us are going through the process to try to get that raised, because $50,000 is really not a lot of money when you're talking about some of the bigger agencies like NCDOT. Most of the things that we do are over $50,000. So what that means for my staff, my team, is that if we do a purchase that's over $50,000, then we have to have the Division of Purchasing Contracts involved. If it's a non-IT, which really all they do is review and make sure that we followed all of the administrative codes and rules that are in place for that particular purchase, and they provide us with their approval to award. So if it's under the $50,000, then I don't have to get another level of review and approval in order to award the contract. So really, when you talk about delegation, you're talking about dollar amounts. So for the open market, each agency also have a purchasing policy, as I mentioned earlier. This here is particular to NCDOT. But if you look at another agencies, it should be similar. It may not be exact, but it should be similar. So for us, the NCDOT, if it's a purchase that's less than $10,000, we consider that to be a micro purchase, and it really doesn't, whether it's a good or service, well, good particularly. In some cases, there may be exceptions for the services, but in most cases, that is the category in which we authorize P cards. So a P card is a procurement card, and the different divisions and business units within NCDOT have them. And so they are authorized to go out and just make the purchase, right? And charge it on the P card. If it's $10,001 up to $29,000, we consider that to be a small purchase. And what is goods or services, and our services, and we want an informal vendor quote for that. Our document, our request for quote, or our IFB, invitation for bid, is required for services. And mainly that is because a lot of our janitorial contracts for NCDOT across the state, for janitorial contracts, there are some requirements in terms of materials or chemicals in which they can and cannot use. And there are some time limits in which they have access to some of the facilities and not. And there's some other requirements that we need to make sure that the vendor understands and agrees to, because in some cases it's required by law. And so in order to make sure that that's not a contract that's really, or a purchase that's done through a P card, a simple credit card kind of purchase, we want to make sure that we have their signature on a document, that they understand what the requirements are and they are agreeing to it. So we do require those to be done on what we call our documents. And so if it's a purchase of $29,001 up to $50,000, we call that an informal purchase. Competition is required, so we will be getting quotes for that, but we will not be advertising that. That means we would not be posting a bid. We do require the vendor to agree to the North Carolina terms and conditions. So that means that we will be using our solicitation documents for that. If it's a goods, we do 3 quotes on, and typically we use our RFQ, or request for quote. For service, it could be done on an IFB or RFP, more likely an IFB. If it's $50,001 or more, the vendor is required to agree to the terms and conditions of North Carolina. It's advertised on an open market unless we have a approved waiver of competition. And we'll talk a little bit about waivers in a minute as well. So for most contracts, the standard is 3 years. If we want to do a contract that's longer than 3 years, then we are required to get the approval of the state purchasing officer to do so. And for contracts that's estimated to be over $1 million, they are reviewed both by, we have a legal team here within NCDOT, and so we work with our legal on our side, and also when it goes to PNC, they have a legal team as well that will take a look at it and review it. A standard term contract what we stated previously, is used by all the agencies. It's the basic definition for a term contract. And as I stated, this can be either mandatory or convenient. An agency-specific contract is really the same type of contract, except for it's specific to the agency. There are certain things that only NCDOT buys, right? For instance, what comes to mind is aggregate, or the things that the material that we use, or asphalt, to help build or maintain the roads of North Carolina. Most, other agencies are not buying that. So we have agency-specific term contracts that's just for us, that helps us be able to procure those particular products quickly. The contracts are already in place. These are mostly done with indefinite quantities. An award is based on historical data. That just means that we are going to look and see the usage within the agency, and does it make sense to have a agency-specific term contract in place for the good and or service. These are also standard 3-year. Most of our contracts are 1 year with 2 optional renewal years. But again, it is the 3-year period. But instead of issuing a 3-year contract, most of the time the language states that it's a 1-year contract with 2 optional renewal years attached to that. When we talk about contract service, we are talking about when we are hiring an individual who will come in and perform a task for us that really requires a specialized skills or some type or knowledge. And for example, our janitorials, we do landscaping, security guards, hazardous waste, anything, some building maintenance kinds of things. But if we are doing a consultant contract, it's again requires specialized knowledge, some type of expertise. But we are asking them to come in and investigate a problem or a project, and to provide counsel or some type of analysis or advice. So they're not actually doing any work, they're offering consulting. We are consulting with them. And for any consulting contract that's put in place by the state, it has to be approved by the governor's office. But has always been the case as far as I can remember. And so it's a seamless process. It doesn't interfere with the ability to award the contract. It's just another step in getting the approval for that contract. DIT, Department of Information Technology, these are where all of our IT purchases go through. And as you see there on the screen, that's the general statute that regulates that for the state. Typically, what they're buying are hardware, software, database subscriptions, license agreements, and some type of data. Statewide, DIT procurement approves all of the technology purchases that are over agency delegation. And they also have state term contracts in place for IT purchases as well. So I mentioned it would be, if anything over $50,000 would need to be advertised unless there is a waiver of competition in place. And so a waiver of competition, it means that we are going to purchase it by some means that's other than a competitive bid. It means, in most cases, what we see is that it's a sole source. And that means that we can only get it from one source, right? And in some cases, or in the case of sole source, that doesn't mean that doesn't necessarily mean that someone else doesn't sell it. For instance, there are things that we buy that are sold in different other regions or states. However, the proprietary over that particular item has designated certain areas, regions within the state that can only be sold by this company. So we are required to buy it from that company, because if we're inside of their region zone, then those are the only that's the only vendor that's authorized to sell it. So for us, that is similar to a sole source. If it's brand specific, that also means that we have to have a particular type. If it's an emergency, that means that we don't have time to go out and do a competitive process, and we're gonna go ahead and make the purchase. If it's standardization, that means that we have made the purchase previously, and it makes sense to buy what we bought previously so that all of our equipment would be similar and work well together. If it's ongoing job or task, simply means, for example, if I've already started doing maintenance on this particular section of the highway, and I bought 10 tons of some material, asphalt, right? And I need to buy some more. Well, I'm not going to advertise that. Mm-hmm. I'm already in the job. I just need to buy more of the same of what I've already bought. But there are probably about 20 conditions that there's on the waiver of competition, but that can be found if you Google that authorization there under 01 NCAC is North Carolina Administrative Code 05B.1401. Then you will see the conditions in which an agency can waive competition listed there. So we're at the first part of our questions. Carla, are there any questions?
There are no questions in the chat, but feel free to unmute and ask a question if you have one. Raise your hand though, please, if there are questions. And our first question is from Victoria Williams.
Hello.
Go ahead, Victoria. Good morning.
Good morning.
And I'm sure you may get to this later on. I'm just still not clear on. I'm a personal trainer and a nutrition coach. So I provide services. So I guess I'm wondering, out of all the agencies that you listed, would there be opportunities for me to have contracts with them?
So I can't speak for all of the agencies, and I can't answer that question specifically. But let me think about that for a second, okay, and come back to that because that is a very specialized skill and thing. I would think that off the cuff, the Department of Health and Human Services may be the first one that comes to mind because they do health and human services, so they may have opportunities for you to provide some type of therapy or therapeutic types of training or procedures that they go through. So that's would be my first suggestion of a agency to go to. But I'll give that some further thought as we go along.
Okay, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
And then there is a question in the chat. Will you be walking through how to submit for contracts for service-based businesses like workshops, coaches, etc.?
I'm sorry, ask that again, caller.
How will you be walking through how to submit for contracts for service-based businesses like workshops, coaches, etc.?
So we are going to cover, how you do business with the state. And so really what you want to do, so I think the answer to your question is yes. We would talk about that. We're going to talk about how you register in EVP. We're going to talk about, how you select, the importance of selecting the correct commodity code so that you will get notification when there is a solicitation for that good and or service that you identified. So we will be talking through that.
I'm going to go to Betty Jones, who has her hand raised.
Good morning, everyone. Again, my name is Betty Jones. I'm the owner of BJ's Logistics and Consultant LLC. I have a transportation business. How can this process help my business? Do I have to find a job and be the vendor on the job, or can I be a subcontractor on some of these jobs? I'm just trying to find out how can it help my business.
I understand. So there are obviously transportation needs within NCDOT, and I'm sure some of the other agencies as well. Again, I think you need to, a couple things come to mind. You need to make sure that you are registered in EVP correctly and you use the correct commodity code that identifies what service you are offering. And you also want to make sure you are aware of when there are work meetings or when there are networking opportunities, because you want to, if you talk about being a subcontractor, then that means that you would need to be known to the prime contractors and that you're available. So a lot of that will be networking and making sure that the prime contractors know who you are, your capabilities, when and where, and you can provide services, and how big is your organization, how many trucks do you have. So in order to be a subcontractor, then you will need to be again well connected, or I think have a relationship with a prime contractor in order to do that.
Okay, that sounds awesome. Thank you so very much.
You're welcome.
And a question in the chat, and I will answer this just to bring clarification for the person answering. I'm sorry, the person asking the question. And the question is, how do brand new businesses have the opportunity to take advantage of contracts if funds are required to purchase contracts? So I just want Joni to give you an opportunity to clarify. Their thought is that funds are required to purchase contracts.
You don't have, the funds are not required to purchase contracts. I think you're referring to the 1.75% vendor fee. That is for goods only. And so if you're providing a service, it's not applicable to what you're doing. But there is a 1.75% goods fee um, um, for contracts that are awarded within the state. But you're not purchasing a contract. That is, please don't, I don't want anyone to walk away with that thought in their mind. There certainly is not any type of requirement for that.
All right. And the last question before we move on will be some of the RFPs require you to have an office in their area. What if you have a home office? Does that eliminate me from applying for this RFP?
So in any solicitation, the requirements for that particular solicitation is listed in there. There is no, I can't give you a blanket yes or no, because there may be circumstances in which they want a physical office, and there may be instances in where a home office will be applicable. I think that is we're going to talk in a little bit about opportunity to have to offer to send in written questions for solicitations, invitations for bid, or requests for a quote or RFP. And that would be a great opportunity for you to ask that question during that question period.
Awesome. And so the last question in the chat, I haul aggregates. So is there a code for hauling aggregates?
There is. I don't know it off the top of my head, but Carla will be able to, she's going to send out this presentation to everyone that's on the call. And she can also give you my contact information. I am in the process of hiring a vendor liaison person. So that position is open right now for my staff, but I will be glad to, if you could send me the question, email me the question about that, and I will make sure you get a response.
Awesome. All right, so we can move on from this point, Joni, and get back to our modules.
Okay, thank you, Carla.
Thank you.
All right, so we're going to switch gears here and move into the process you need to follow if you want to do business with the state. So we're going to talk about in this section the electronic vendor portal, how you register and manage your EVP account. So EVP, electronic vendor portal, the basis, the takeaway from this slide are that it's a single cloud-based application, right? It provides a single point of access for all North Carolina organizations. The solicitations are posted there. You can respond there as well through the normal paper submission process. It's important that you read this solicitation because it will tell you specifically how they are accepting responses. So it could either be through the EVP or it could be the normal paper submission process. And again, for goods only, there is a 1.75% fee that's associated with that contract award, only for the contract award, not for you to submit a bid. So what are the frequently asked questions with regard to EVP? Why is my company required to pay this 1.75%? Well, we think that it allows the vendor to be able to market yourself, like to the state agencies. It also helps pay for the state ability to conduct business electronically. And so it offsets really the expense of the development, maintenance, and ongoing of our electronic process, procurement process. How does your company benefit by using EVP? Again, you have a single point of access to all government entities, right? You have that which increases your access to the markets within the state of North Carolina. And we think savings in the areas of processing, marketing, and administrative costs. So there are some very good reasons why your company would benefit by by using EVP. So let's talk about EVP registration. To start the process, of course, you're going to need internet access. You're going to need to have a federal ID or EIN number, employee identification number, and a valid email address. And so, again, you're going to get a copy of this presentation. So there is a link there that you can go to where you would be able to either if you're not registered, to be able to get registered there or complete the registration process if you've already started it. And also if you have some questions, the information, contact information for the help desk is listed as well. The EVP, again, is free. When you register, it will notify you of business opportunities. So it's really important that you register, and again, that you select the correct code that corresponds to the good and or service that you want to, you are ready and able to offer to the state. So ready and able are important, right? So, and also there are instances in which some vendors think that it is a good thing to just, click on all the commodity codes. Please don't do that. A couple of reasons. One, your email is going to be inundated with a lot of messages that you are not going to be able to respond to, because that's really not what you want to offer or can offer to the state. Two, in those instances where competition is not required and the purchasing staff are looking for, and so that they can send a request for a quote to, right? They're going to go into EVP and look under that commodity code, right? And look for vendors. And if you're listed in all of the codes, that they will have no idea what you were really able to provide to the state. So they probably are not going to send one to you, because it's unlikely that you're able to provide all of the services or goods that are listed there. So please make sure that you choose or select the appropriate commodity code for the business that good or service that you want, that you're ready and able to provide to the state. It's also important that you keep your information updated there. So it's a one-stop registration for where agencies are searching for hub vendors offering goods or services that we're looking for. So we do use that. And it is important that we're able to contact you, so your information needs to be correct. You need to be giving us a contact information that you are checking. When we are doing quote requests, right, we're gonna email you a quote or send you an email requesting a quote, and we'll give you a day or two to give us a response back. But we need to move forward. We have someone that's waiting for this good and our service, so we need to be able to process it. So it's important that you are giving us a contact information that you are checking, that you are monitoring, and you're responding to. So I encourage you to make sure you're doing that. In terms of managing your account, there's that link there. Again, you're going to get there. There is a open the job aid button that you will see at that link, and it can provide you direction on how to change your password, update your profile information, add, delete, or edit, or add or edit a location. So please make sure that you're utilizing that. Are there any questions on this section?
Second, let's see if we have no questions in the chat, but we have Betty with her hand raised. So Betty, if you want to ask a question.
Yes, thank you. I was looking at my site on my EVP website, and it asked me, and I'm old, so I might not know what this is and supposed to know. What is E-Verified? It asks, am I E-Verified? Is this
Carla or
company?
John, can you answer that?
Let's see. I don't know whether Shay or John is on the call that can answer the E-Verified question.
Hey, this is Shay, and I am not familiar with that. I don't recall
Me
having come
neither.
across it at any point. So what we'd have to do is to get a response from
Yep.
EVP system. Is it
Okay.
holding you up from doing something, Betty?
No, it's not. I'm already on the site, but it's just that if it says it, am I e-verified? And if they would get me a heads up on being contacted for vendors or that would be good. But I just didn't know what e-verified was.
Okay.
Yes.
And again, not familiar with that specific terminology. It could be just that front end process where they're verifying your email address. But let me take that one as a follow up.
And I also
Okay.
placed the number
you.
for the help desk in the chat if you want to try calling them, where you'll get a live person that may be able to answer too.
Thanks, Carla.
You're welcome. All right, and so Giselle, if you want to ask your question.
Thank you. And I might have missed this, but it was clear in that presentation that how important it is, the commodity codes. And I'm wondering, I struggled when I was setting up my e-vendor profile to find commodity codes that fit with what I do. And I heard at least one other person on the call does coaching, provides facilitation services, et cetera. Is there somebody that I can contact, or other than the help desk, that can help me find the commodity codes that actually is aligned with the work that I do?
We do have business development assistants, and I'll provide that contact number. Shay, did you want to say anything towards that?
So unfortunately, that is something that we have to align with what is in the EVP system. So it's going to be the same process, really, for us, for anything that is not, kind of common, as far as those codes go. So one of the things that may also help is when you see solicitations, so go into the EVP system, do some keyword searches, and find some of those solicitations that do in fact match with what your particular business provides in terms of services or products. And then based on that, we sometimes have to back into what those commodity codes are. It is a discovery process. It's not always, very straightforward. So you just kind of have to pick the best that works for you and use a combination of those processes to get there.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Sure.
And we do have a training that's offered for selecting commodity codes, and that link has been shared with you in the chat.
Thank you.
All right. And that ends our questions in the chat, Joni, and raised hands. So if you want to move forward.
Thank you, Carla.
Thank
So
you.
we'll shift here again, and in this section, we're going to talk about the Hub program, the Hub efforts, and a little about the Hub certification. We are on the call with the Hub certification experts. So I really encourage you to rely on this team of folks to help with that if you have some questions with regard to that. So our historically underutilized businesses, or our hub, it was per Executive Order 25, as you see stated there, the hub goal participation is 10% for both construction spending and goods and services. And so we do have our hub vendors identified in EVP. Your hub application certification and recertification is now processed through EVP. What are our efforts with regard to Hub? As you see that's there listed on the screen now. We have added Hub language to all our solicitations, given the vendor the opportunity to self-identify as a Hub. We also do project upcoming opportunities. We do a hub plan, or we take a look, or usually a year out, as to what we're buying within our agencies, and try to share that information as well. Notice of opportunities, again, is posted on EVP, which is also, I believe, posted in the hub office as well, from that site. And we also at NCDOT share our postings with our Office of Civil Rights as well. So the hub plan, again, this is specific. This particular one that you're looking at is specific to NCDOT, because that's where I am. But the other agencies do something very similar to this. Those are the ranges that we talked about earlier. And so for 29,000 or less, it's really a PCAR process for us, more so than not. But we do, that doesn't mean that the different divisions of business units cannot send through my team a request to purchase. We will handle those, but typically they're done through a PCAR, unless it's a service and it's something that requires the vendor to agree to our terms and conditions. And if that's the case, then it does have to come through my office. And so for, again, the 29,000 and 1 cent up to the 50,000 mark, there's a minimum of 3 quotes. We get the vendor to agree to the terms and conditions, and we search, and we really try to have at least 1 quote from a hub vendor. But that requires you to be responsive to our requests, right? You have to provide us with a response in order to be considered. And so for that area, that's 50,000, 1 cent and above, again, direct solicit at least 1 hub. We try to do that. And again, the hub language is added to our solicitation documents. This is the a link or identification of a web certification, web page certification for hub. You would register, obviously, online, download the application, and provide the required documentation for that. The statewide uniform certification applications, there are really 3 possible applications. You would choose the appropriate one for your business and only fill that one out. This is a list. You're going to get this presentation, so I won't go through each one of them, but this is a list of the required documents for all the applicants. And this continues that list as well. The business structure that's required. If your business is a corporation, then you would need the documentation that's listed under that section. If it's a LLC, then those are the documentations you need for that, and etc. As you can see there on the screen. Are there any questions in this section?
There is a question, is there a way to save our bids in the EVP system that we're bidding on or interested in bidding on?
Not sure what you mean by save. Can you come off mute and help me understand, please?
This question is from Nicholas Campbell. And
so let me say this. So the bids that are posted, they're posted there for in terms of and if you look inside the document, that if you're interested in it, you open it up, and so there is a posting, there is a opening date. So that is at that day and time, then that bid would no longer be solicited, it will close. And so I'm not sure what you mean by save, but so it's there for the period of time in which it's open for bid submissions.
All right, no other questions in the chat. Feel free to raise your hand and ask a question and unmute. All right. If no more questions, oh, I see Victoria. You can ask your question.
Hi, yeah, I was just wondering, because I'm trying to take notes, and will a recording of this presentation be available to us later?
Yes, it will be
Okay.
emailed along with the presentation.
Wonderful, thank you.
I do have a question in the chat and then a hand raised. Where's the best place to find networking events to attend to find prime contractors?
So I would suggest if you would send me an email, I'll get you in contact with, because mostly for the prime contractor, you're gonna want to be talking to our construction side for NCDOT, the construction side of the house. And so if you would send me I will give you contact for or Shay, if you want to do that, you get in contact for OCR. And they do workshops and can help with the information in terms of when the different divisions may be doing vendor program.
I certainly
and-
will. Oh, go ahead, Carla.
Well, I was just going to also mention that the Hub office will also email to the email address that's provided in EVP events that are held. And then in the bid solicitation document, you will also find information for attending pre-bid meetings where you can also meet prime contractors.
Thank you, Carla. And so in addition to that, those notifications will also come, for example, from the North Carolina Minority Business Development Agency Center. Samet just did a couple of sessions within the last month or so. So there are some that will be targeted specifically for that particular vendor, the prime contractor, and they will provide details about how their process works, if they have pre-qualification, and those kinds of things. And just one other thing that can be helpful also is, again, based on what fits your particular business. So do some keyword searches within the EVP system, and then pay attention to the prime contractors that are bidding on those particular solicitations. Then it gives you an opportunity after the fact, to also identify some prime contractors that are likely in the particular area that best fits for your particular business. So those are just another couple of tips to add to what Joni and Carla are sharing with you.
Awesome. Thank you, Shay. And hand raised by Carrie, if you want to ask your question.
Good morning, all. Actually, I don't have a question. I just wanted to respond to Nicholas' comment on whether or not bids are saved in the EVP system. I want to say yes, there is a menu. It's called My Bids. So anytime that you select that you are interested in a bid or you want to respond to a solicitation, it is recorded under My Bids, and it even records those solicitations that are on the Ariba system. So if you go to eBids, there is also an Ariba sourcing. So when you go into the vendor platform and you're interested in responding to any solicitations, you may have to go to Ariba. You may have to put some in the mail, or you have to go to the bonfire if it's a community or university agency. But you do have a menu in the EVP platform for bids that you have participated on or showed an interest in. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing that. It's very helpful, Carrie. All right, and so we do not have any other questions in the chat, Joni, so I think we can proceed.
All right, thank you. In this section, we're going to talk about the different types of solicitation documents, the content within those solicitations, and we're going to talk about what do we mean, what are requirements versus evaluation criteria. So for solicitation planning, usually the end user, right, the person of the group or the division in which we are procuring for, they have to identify the need and define what that is. We, the purchasing office, is not the subject matter expert. So we need them to make, we work with them to make sure we understand that what they are asking for is well defined. Um, they provide us with information. They develop the specification and the scope of work. And with that, we review and authorize documents and the processes that we're going to use to do the procurement. We prepare the solicitation document and either we post it or send it directly to a vendor, depending upon, again, that delegation, that dollar amount in which we are working under. Purchasing is mainly the management of accurate solicitation development, the actual solicitation of bids, and the award process, facilitating the evaluation and the recommendation for award process. That's what we do. For vendor direct quotes, it's a EVP tool. It's for goods and/or services. Is used for purchases up to $29,000. The buyer, the purchaser, is able to select from a list of registered vendors, right, who they're going to send a request for a quote to. For the IRQ, the informal request quote is also for goods or services, but this is for purchases up to $50,000. We are able to add language to that, our specifications if we need to. Again, the buyer or the purchaser is able to select from a registered vendors list, right, who to send this informal request for a quote to. And it also requires you to agree to the North Carolina terms and conditions. So for request for a quote, it's a solicitation document. It's normally used for non-advertised procurements. It's sent directly to the vendor via email. It's important, again, that your contact information is kept current and that you are monitoring that email. The vendor agrees to the North Carolina terms and conditions. We can use it, this particular tool, up to purchases that are up to $50,000.
I don't have a better way to say that, we want to.
The IFB, the invitation for bid. This is a solicitation document that we use when we have well-defined goods and simple services, so we know exactly what we want, right? We think we're going to spend more than $50,000. We are going to do an evaluation process in some cases, but we also can do what we call low cost meets spec, or the lowest responsive bid that we receive will be awarded. It's posted for a minimum of 10 days, and there's a public bid opening, and it could have a potential site visit. We'll talk more about that in a minute. For the RFP, the request for proposal, this is when we are really seeking competition and offers for more complex services or a combination of goods and services, and it is typically well over $50,000. That's when we know the agency knows what they want in terms of an end result. But they're asking the vendor, going to the vendor community, asking for proposals for best solutions. How do we get that? How do we get to, here's where we want to end up. What's the best way? What's the best product? What are the best services that will get us there? This is an evaluation method. It is RFP. I have never known one to cost me spec. It is always an evaluation. Again, this is for more complex services or when we're doing a combination of purchasing goods and services. It's posted again for a minimum of 10 days. There will be a public bid opening, and it also could have a site visit as well attached to it. For RFIs, that's exactly what it is. It's a request for information. We trying to ascertain levels of interest or the number of potential vendors that are out there. It is not a solicitation, so no award or offer will come from it. There are no requirements for agreeing to the state terms and conditions because it is not a contract. After the response period is canceled in the system. Talk a little bit about the different sections within the solicitation document. In section 1.0, that is the purpose and background. That's where you'll get information about why the agency needs this purchase. In section 2.0, that's general information. That's where you're going to see information on solicitation schedule, the question period that I talked about, the number of originals or copies that need to be returned, how the bid submission, how the bid should be submitted. That information is in that section as well. The method of award 3.0 and the bid evaluation process contains how we're going to award it, what process we're going to use. If there's in confidentiality information, it will be listed there in evaluation criteria, how we are going to evaluate it, whether it be low cost meets spec or it be best value. And if it's best value, what are the criteria that will be looked upon? In section 4.0, that's where you will find all the requirements, right? What are the warranty? Are there any references needed? Experience that's required? Are we going to do a background check? Are there any certifications, the licenses required? In section 5.0, that's where you will find the scope of work or the specifications for that particular purchase. Are there any deviations allowed, and what are they? Are there any required tasks? And in section 6.0, the administration of the contract information is listed there. We will, particularly for the more substantial contracts, we're going to ask you for your project manager information. In other words, who would be the main point of contact if this is awarded to your company. If there's any reporting requirements that will be in that section. If there's a dispute, how it will be resolved, that information is in there, and how contract changes will be handled. That information is in section 6.0 as well. And then we have attachments. That's where you will find the pricing form, instructions to the vendor. That's where our North Carolina terms and conditions are, and several other supplemental types of information. It could be with maps or diagrams, or also, if applicable, will be added in the attachment section as well. I want to talk about what the documents of change and what they mean. So an addendum. This is a change that's made to a solicitation before opening. In other words, so we're going to post the example. If I posted a bid on today, December the 18th, and let's just say it's gonna open on January the 15th, right? If I need to change anything within that solicitation during the posting period, then I will post an addendum with the information on the change in it. It will give you the same notification. You need to it will be posted in the same location as the original bid, so it'll be right under it, right? Kind of connected to it. But it's important, if there's a solicitation that you are interested in and want to respond to, you want to make sure you continue to check back to see if there has been an addendum that's been added. Again, this is information that needs to be changed or communicated prior to the opening. So it's important that you, be checking back and making sure that an addendum had not been issued for that. So if a request for clarification, this is after the bid has been opened, right? and someone in the purchasing staff has a question about a response or a lack of a response, then we are, if there is a computing error in your pricing form, we are going to, it is not an opportunity for you to change your bid. You will not be able to change your bid, but we will send you what we call a request for clarification. It's typically a yes or no, right? We want to make sure you are aware of certain things. For instance, if you submit a bid response and you identify certain information within your bid response as confidential, right? For the state of North Carolina, pricing is never confidential. I don't care if you write the word confidential all over the pricing page. It would never be held to be confidential. It is so we will send you a clarification and make sure you understand that we will not hold your pricing confidential, right? We also, if it's not pricing and there's some other piece of information that's pertaining to your business and you identified that page as being confidential, we will respect that it's confidential, but we're going to send you a request for clarification, informing you of a couple things. One, are you sure that this information on page such and such is confidential? We will respect that. So if we get a request for a public records request, we would not disclose that information to the public. If that information, if the fact that we don't disclose it is challenged and it goes to court, then our clarification that we send to you is going to inform you that the state will not defend it. You will have to come in and defend it yourself. So we want to make sure everyone's clear on that. But again, other than cost and the information that's proprietary, you identify it as confidential. We will hold it confidential. We will not get that information out. But if there is a challenge to that, then you are required to come in and legally defend that. The state will not do it on your behalf. Best and final offer, that is a negotiation tool. For instance, if we have a solicitation out there, we get 10 responses, the top 5 that after going through the evaluation process, we've listed the top 5 we think offers that we're interested in, then we may choose to negotiate with those top 5. There are particular questions that we have that are individual to each 5. So we're not calling everybody in at the same time. You would not know that we're talking to another vendor. We will contact you and identify the specific items that we would like to negotiate with you. We'll do the same for the next vendor. We will not let you know that we're talking to anyone else. We will schedule a time in which that negotiation could take place. And once that meeting has happened, whether it's virtual or in the office, at the end, after that meeting happens, we will send you what we call a BAFO, a best and final offer. But what that does for us is, one, it memorializes what we agreed to in the negotiation. It also makes what we agreed to a legal part of the contract. So that best and final offer is a form. It's not as, it's probably maybe 4 or 5 pages. It's not a large document, but you will sign it, the state will sign it, and it makes it part of the legal contract at the point of award. An amendment, that is what we use if a contract has been awarded and there's a change that's needed in it. We would do that by doing an amendment. We will make that change by doing an amendment, and that's something that has to be agreed upon by both sides, both the state and the vendor. So those are the documents of change that we use in procurement. Submitting a bid or proposal is very critical and important that you pay attention to the language that's being used there. You need to read the entire documentation carefully. You need to make sure you sign your bid submission. So I always share, there's only one instance in which I am aware in which an unsigned bid will be accepted, and that is in a RFP, a request for a proposal, because in a request for a proposal is also asking you to document or to have included in your submission in which you acknowledge certain things within the bid, your understanding of and your acceptance of, and you are required to sign that document. So legal has determined that your signature on that page, it makes it a legal offer. If you, any other incident, okay, so it's always important that you sign it, because unless your document is signed, it is not a legal offer and we can't consider it. You need to pay particular attention to words like shall, must, and mandatory, because those will be followed. So please pay attention. Make sure you sign your document and your submission, and make sure you read the entire solicitation. And I know it can be cumbersome, but I want to encourage you to do it so you make sure you understand exactly what's being required, who's going to be responsible for doing what and when, and you have a clear understanding of what you are offering to contract to. The solicitation schedule is a snapshot. This particular table is in the IFB and RFQ solicitation documents. As listed there on the right-hand side, those are the event. That's what happens. So the issue, the solicitation, that's the responsibility of the state. And so there will be a date in which the solicitation is issued. If there's a pre-bid meeting or a site visit, the date and time would be listed in that column. For IFBs and RFPs, you have a written question period of time. And so the deadline to submit written questions would be listed there as well. And you may or may not have that line that says provide responses to questions. But typically what happens is, for instance, I posted a bid, example, today. Today is the 18th, and I'm gonna have it open until January the 15th. Then I may give you until January the 3rd, given the holiday, to submit any written questions. So if you send me a question this afternoon after the first post, or you send it tomorrow, or you send it next week, then I'm gonna take your question. I'm not gonna respond to it. I'm gonna keep it, right? I'm gonna put it on the table. And once the deadline for questions have passed, right, it's a day and time. So on the 3rd at 2 p.m. at 2:01, I'm going to make sure I have on my table, I should have all the questions that were submitted to me. If the question is pertaining to procurement, then I'm going to, beside on that table, I'll provide a response. If the question is a subject matter expert or end user kind of question, I'm going to send a question to the division or the business unit that is requesting the purchase, let them provide me with a response. I'm going to put their response on the table, and then I'm going to post. Remember, we talked about that if anything changes or anything needs to be, additional information needs to be provided once a bid has been posted, then it's going to be posted on what we call an addendum. So I'm going to put out an addendum, and an addendum is going to have a table on it, and it has all the written questions and all the responses to those questions. So everyone would get all the questions and all the responses at the same time. Now, some people, on all the solicitations that are posted, you will have the purchasing person who's handling that particular purchase, the procurement specialist name and contact information will be listed on that solicitation. Now, you can call them if you want to. They have all been instructed not to provide verbal responses, but things happen, right? And they may give you one. This is what I want you to know. Whatever they tell you over the phone is not legally binding on the state. If you want to make sure that the question and the response is legally binding you need to submit your question in writing. It needs to be included in the addendum. The addendum is a part of the contract. It makes it legally binding on the state. So again, do not call the procurement person with your question. You can, but whatever they tell you is not binding on the state. It has to be a part of the addendum. It has to be on the addendum and listed part of the contract. Then submit bids. That is that you will get a date and time in which the deadline to submit bids. At the end of that time, we will no longer accept bids, right? We're not gonna, if it's a mail it to this office. You know, some people bring theirs in. That's perfectly fine. If you get here after, if it's today at 2 o'clock, you get here at 2:01, we're not going to take your bid. We will not accept a late bid. We're not going to argue with you about it. We'll take it, but we will not open it. It would not be considered. So it is critical that you meet the submission day and time. That is the most critical thing, and that you sign it, right? And that you have a good offer as well. The contract award and contract effective date, those may be listed there. But what I would say about those 2 dates, that if they're listed, is that those are dates that they're working towards. They may or may not. The contract, depending upon, again, we may go into negotiations that were not anticipated when they put that date out. So it may, take it out a week or a couple of days. You just don't know. But the contract award and effective date are aspiration dates that we're working towards. Vendor questions. This is the exact picture what it looks like in a solicitation document. 2.5 is big questions. You will have instructions there on how you can submit your written questions. Again, I encourage you to submit your questions in writing so that it'll be legal. The response that you get would be legally binding on the state. Again, questions answered on the phone or in person on the site visit. We'll talk about a site visit in a second. And in fact, we're going to talk about it now. So site visits are opportunities for the vendor to, if there's a need to physically see the location or gather additional information to provide a responsible proposal, then we're going to have a site or pre-bid meeting, right? And they can be categorized as either mandatory or urged and cautioned. If it's stated that it's mandatory, there would be a specific date, time, and location that's also listed in the solicitation document. The vendor will be required to sign in and out of that mandatory visit. Late vendors can attend, but your offer would not be accepted because at the time that it begins, we're going to take up our sign-in sheet, and you're not going to be able to sign in. We're not going to get into a confrontation with anyone about them being able to be there. You can be there, but if you submit an offer, we would not consider it. Offers from late vendors or vendors who did not attend and for the entirety of that mandatory site visit or pre-bid meeting, we would not, your submission would not be considered. If it's determined to be urged and cautioned, we think it's a great idea that you come. Again, we're going to give you the specific date, time, and location. We are going to ask you to sign in, but there will be late vendors can attend. The sign-in sheet will stay down the entire time. Your attendance is not required, right? In order for us to accept your offer, to review or to consider your offer. We just think it's a great idea that you come, but if it's urged and cautioned, it's up to you whether you think you need to do that or not. But again, on either a site visit or a pre-bid meeting, and I've gone to many site visits, and there's always an opportunity to ask questions. And of course, we're going to have a subject matter expert there as well. And so they are able to provide you with responses on the spot. Again, any verbal response you get is not legally binding on the state. Even if I go to a site visit or a pre-bid meeting, if I ask a question, I get a response. If that written question period ends, I'm going to send in my written question, the same one that I just asked you at the site visit, right? Because I want your response. I liked what you said. I want that to be true. I want that to be legally binding on the state. So I'm going to submit my question, even though I just asked it at the site visit. I'm going to submit it in written form during the question period so that it can be legally binding on the state. That's very important. Please make sure you remember that. Submittal instructions, you will, again, it's important that you read that and make sure you are following the instructions that are there in terms of how you submit your response for the bid. Vendor requirements, this is really specification that you must need or submit with your proposal in order to be found to be responsive. Is either yes or no. Again, an example of that is like the first one listed there, delivery product. If we say we need the product be delivered within 15 consecutive calendar days from award, there's a section there right beside that in which you are required to fill in how many days you will be able to deliver, within you will be able to deliver the product. If we say we need it in 15 days, if you say you can deliver it in 30 days or 20 days, then your bid would consider it to be non-responsive because you can't meet our need. Right? So those are the kinds of things that we will be looking for. Evaluation criteria, this is really the how and the what the state will be evaluating. These are examples of things that we look at but again, if it's the best value evaluation inside the solicitation document, the evaluation criteria will be listed. So we could be looking at vendor experience. We could be asking you about your staffing plan. The folks that's going to be working on our project, what is their experience? Send us their resumes. We could ask you for your technical approach, how you're going to go about meeting the need that the state has identified. So it could be, but again, how the evaluation criteria will be listed in the solicitation documents. Are there any questions?
We do have a question in the chat that goes back to the discussion of, I think, the IFB, the invitation for bids. And the question is, what defines simple services? Can you please provide an example or some examples of what would be considered simple services?
Janitorial contract, right? That's it's a cleaning. A simple service is maybe providing some type of maintenance. It is where we are clear. We being the state is clear on what the requirements are. We're going to list them very definitive in there. If we need, if we are purchasing, I don't know, 50 copiers, right? We're going to tell you, well, that's a good, it's not a service. I'm trying to think of something real quick. If we want to hire someone to come in and move furniture for us, right? That's a simple service for us, right? It's not complicated. It's not a lot of different ways you can do that, right? Can you be there at a particular time, have the capacity and the manpower to move certain, desks or chairs, or if we need if we need a room furnished, that's a simple service. Are you able to provide what we're looking for? So when we say it's complex, that means there are many different ways to do it, right? We want you to tell us the way that you suggest we do it. So it's not that, it's not a foregone conclusion. So that's an example. And I'm sorry if it was not as clear. But for simple services, they are going to be clearly identified. They're not asking you to provide any information. They're asking you to just, can you do what I asked you to do? And if so, what are you costing? What would be the cost to do that? So if it's what we call to be complex, then we're going to ask you to help us figure out how to do something and not tell you directly what our need is or what our requirement is. I hope that helps some.
All right. Okay, if no follow-up comment on that, I'll go to hands raised. And I see Calvin, if you want to unmute and ask your question.
Yes, how you doing? My name is Calvin Fleming. I'm the owner of ASCII Technology. We're a IT consultant firm here in northern Charlotte. We just received our hub certification, so I appreciate your what you're doing and helped us out doing that. And also, we just started getting into the university bonfire and looking at some what you call solicitations. And when you were talking about answering the questions from the procurement analysts, right? So we did this just recently. We answered a question, but during that solicitation, they wanted you to email the questions. So we emailed the questions. It's like 19 questions. The procurement analyst uh, told us that we were sending information that was a little bit over her knowledge. She sent us a reply said that she's going to send it to the end user. Last night, she sent us back an email saying that the amendment was out. None of our questions was posted on there. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? You know, we did a lot of research trying to get all the background, everything we need for this, and all the questions that we was trying to ask to her. None of our questions were posted on that addendum. I would just think we get some help on that.
Yeah, well, it doesn't sound good. But so this is what I say. Yeah, that should not happen. Let me just be transparent and say that. So let me also say, if your question, I don't mean you individual, but if questions are received and they're similar in nature, your particular question may not be the one that's listed, but they're similar. I mean, we may get 100 questions. If 5 of them are asking the same thing, we're going to choose one of them and answer the question, but it answers your question. So it may not be your question word for word, but it's of the same nature. And so you may see some of that. But with regard to where your question is not similarly asked in, by another question, and you have not received a response, that is not good. And they
She
posted
sent it
in
to
the
the end user.
okay, so the end user during the procurement process, the process is between the procurement office and the vendor. The end user is a point of contact for the procurement office. There should be no contact between the end user and the vendor during the procurement process. So the procurement office is that intermediary between the end user and the vendor. So yes, again, if you recall, I stated when we get the questions, right? If I get 50 questions, if they are not 50 questions related to procurement, I am not the subject matter expert. So I'm going to take those 50 questions,
Okay.
send them to my end user. They have to provide me with a response, right? And then I am going to post the questions and the responses. So it's not something that's on the end user. But if I don't get my questions responded to by the end user within a reasonable period of time, then what you should see is an addendum. Again, that's that document that changes something while it's still open. The solicitation is open. You should see an addendum in which the opening date is being pushed out, and you are given additional time because if I only have a day or two and I still haven't before my opening date and I haven't posted my responses to my written question, I think it's unreasonable you cannot continue you need to push the opening date out because you need additional time. Folks, vendors need to be able to see the questions and the responses and have time to be able to gear their response towards the responses that were given. And so obviously, if those responses are not given in a reasonable period of time, then the opening date should be pushed out. So in your particular case, I'm not sure what happened, but if I was you, I would contact that procurement person and ask to get the if you email me, I have to email me because I
Okay.
would
Yeah,
make
that's what I
sure
was getting ready to ask
management is
you.
aware
Do
of
we ask for
that.
extension because the end user didn't get back? She said, I'm going to double check with the end user of your questions. And it never got back to us and it closed. And then last night, I got an email. It said that, hey, the addendum R1 was up for the state of, for North Carolina State University, and none of our questions was on there. If you go there, there's only like 10, and none of our questions were talked about that. We spend a
Yeah,
lot of time doing that, so
right. I understand.
I'll
I
eat
would
my.
want to talk to the manager of that section to make sure that they understood that we had questions that were not addressed, but the process seems to be going on, and how can that be? That's what I
Right.
would do.
Okay. And I'll definitely get in touch with you. Thank you so much. And thank you for this
You're
class. I
welcome.
appreciate all the help, you guys.
Absolutely.
All right. No more questions in the chat and no more hands raised, Joni. So I think we can proceed.
All right. So in this section, we're going to talk about direct submittals. We're going to talk about the collaborative EVP, and then solicitation search and response. So in the collaborative, I'm sorry, in the direct submittal, there are different types of options to submit your proposal, or your bid submissions. And it could be direct submittal over email. It could be through the collaborative system tool within EVP, or it could be in the EVP tool, or it could be asked that you mail in your responses. So it's really important that you read the solicitation document so that you would see which method is being used for that specific solicitation. They all are not necessarily going to be the same. So they all would not be receiving bids through EVP. They all would not be mailed in. So you need to read it to see how that particular bid is accepting responses. In the collaborative space, requisition is the informal quoting and pricing request function that's within our electronic procurement system. And then we use it to obtain quotes for goods and services from multiple vendors at the same time. The vendor is required to agree to the state terms and conditions, and it can be used for purchases up to $50,000. The search and response that is used to post formal solicitations, which is our IFB or RFP. It allows the state agencies to be able to advertise, our goods and services, seek an open and fair competition process. We post our bid tabulation prices there once the bids are open. We also post our notice of award for the contract there as well. It allows the vendor, you, to be able to market your goods and services. It's a 24/7 business opportunity, and it's free, again, registration for the portal. This is just a page of the Welcome to the EVP portal. If you look at the top right, there's a sign in if you got an existing login, or right below that, you can register as well. And to your left there, you can see where you can browse solicitation. You can kind of search and see what's posted. This is also just another example of the solicitation page. On this one, you can click, if you could see the responsive solicitation, you can click there to respond and gain access to the sourcing tool event there. On this page, this is an example of the sourcing event page, and as the errors are showing I bring you to your attention the top right corner, the time remaining, that's a countdown clock that lets you know how much time is remaining for bids to be accepted for that particular item that you're looking at. If there's any prerequisites, you can click on that and they'll be listed there. And also, if there's a checklist, there's a checklist of steps to take, and it also provides you the content section, what's included in there. Are there any questions?
There are no questions in the chat. If anyone wants to raise their hand and unmute to ask a question, feel free to do so. So it looks like no questions for this section, Johnny.
Awesome. So we'll continue on. So in this section, we're going to talk about bid openings. We'll cover the evaluation process. Specifically, we're going to talk about bid openings, the evaluation methods, reference checks, Executive Order 50, and clarifications and baffles, which we've talked a little bit about previously. The bid and proposal opening is part of the formal bid process. Publicly open, the date and time and location will be listed there. It's a public bid opening, which means that you are, if that is the case, you are allowed to attend if you so choose to do so. Another alternative that I'd like to make sure you are aware of as well, as I stated earlier, on each of the solicitations on the first page, or definitely no more than the second page, the procurement specialist that's working on that particular bid, their name and contact information is listed on the solicitation. If you are unable to attend the public bid opening, then you can email them after the opening and ask for the bid tabulation of, which is really a listing of who submitted a bid. And as long as we don't anticipate having to go into negotiations, then the pricing will be, what price they submitted will also be disclosed to you as well. Late bids and proposals are not accepted. We will do an attendance sheet at the bid openings as well. That just lets us know who's in the room. Explanation of the evaluation process, whether it's low cost meets spec or it's best value, and we're going to do some type of evaluation for that. I will remind you also that during the purchasing period, you really should only be contacting the purchasing agent or purchasing specialist, procurement specialist. As the tabulation should be posted or will be posted on EVP with the names of the bidder and pricing, as long as we don't anticipate any negotiation being required. So for our evaluation methods, there are several different kinds. We do low cost meets spec, which is exactly what it says. If it meets all requirements of the solicitation, we're going to offer the award to the lowest cost to the agency. Best value weighted. That is, it weighs up to 100, and different components can have different weights. And so, you may have technical cost will always be one of them. It is not necessarily the most important one, but it will be one of them. And whether it's experience or a technical approach, but the weight that is assigned to each category will be listed in the solicitation as well. Another way that we have that's also best value is the narrative method. And this is really a written account so when they are reviewing or evaluating your bid response, it's their evaluation is going to be a written account of the merit of your proposal, right? They're going to talk about things like strengths and weaknesses. If it's considered a weakness, it is considered to be a risk of unsuccessful contract performance, right? It's missing something. If it's considered a strength, we think that it will contribute towards exceeding the requirements of the contract. So they're both best value. They both will be evaluated. It's either going to be a weighted method or it's going to be a narrative where they talk about or look at strengths and weaknesses. Reference checks are could be also another part of the evaluation. Is used to confirm that the vendor has performed offered similar services or products of the same size and scope that we're being asked for. It can be, or it doesn't have to be a part of the checks. So you just look and see if it is there. It could be a requirement. So that means that if you don't offer references, then you are not responsive because you didn't provide the required information. The state will ask all references. We're going to do the same thing. We're going to be consistent, right? So we either gonna check all references or we're gonna check none? Like in other words, if I have a solicitation, I get 5 responses, right? I'm not gonna check 3 of them and not the other 2. I'm gonna check all 5 references from all 5 vendors, or I'm gonna check none. We're gonna ask the same questions. We're gonna document what day and time, who we talked to, and what the question we asked and what was the response. So it will be some consistency there. For clarifications and baffles, talked about them just a couple of minutes ago. Again, the clarification is sent to the vendor to confirm offer during the evaluation stage. It's typically a yes or no confirmation. It clarifies something for us and make sure there's clarity on the vendor side as well, that they understand that their response is this. There's not an opportunity for you to change your bid or to alter your pricing. Best and final offer, that's a negotiation tool. Again, we don't have to negotiate, so we're always requesting you to submit your best and final offer when you submit your submissions, because we don't have to do negotiation. So we may not get to that stage. We may just award based on the submissions that are given. Executive Order 50 is really a price matching opportunity for North Carolina vendors. It's used for goods only. It is not available for services. The vendor must indicate whether they want to participate in this when you submit your bid response. You cannot do it on the back end. When you submit your bid, you would have to have indicated that you want to participate in this process. And that allows a vendor to, if their pricing is within 5% or $10,000 of a non-resident vendor, then we give you an opportunity as a North Carolinian vendor to match that price that the non-North Carolina vendor is offering. So that's what Executive Order 50 is. Are there any questions?
There are no questions in the chat, and if someone wants to raise their hand and unmute, feel free to do so now. And we have no takers, Joni, so we can proceed forward.
Okay. 1 second. All right. So this next section, we're going to talk about award notification, purchase orders, and invoicing. So for award notification, that's really the purchasing officer sends a certificate of award memo to the vendor that was awarded. The documentation can also be attached and onto the purchase order in addition to sending you the notification, obviously. The award will be posted in EVP. We work towards doing it within 3 days of the final approvals. And once the award is given, then at that point, the vendor is going to work directly with the end user. So during the procurement process, the process is between the vendor and the procurement office. Once it has been awarded, it would then shift to the end user and the vendor. Information that's included on purchase orders include, things like description of the item or the service in which we're buying. We're going to have pricing, obviously, delivery schedule, payment terms is listed there, the terms and conditions. And if there are any comments to the vendor, they will be listed there as well. In our invoicing, that's include the item description as well, or the service that's going to be completed, the purchase order or the contract number. And what I would say is sometimes those are the same numbers, right? It's the same number. So what the purchase order is also called the contract number. And so they are often the same thing. The remit to where the payment is going to be sent. So again, you want to make sure that your information is always current in EVP. Typically, the state pays in net 30 days terms. We do electronic payments, and we write checks on Tuesdays and Thursdays. And you do have the opportunity to do electronic payments. Are there any questions on that section?
We have just the commonly asked question about sharing the information, and the answer is the PowerPoint, a copy of it, a PDF copy of it, along with a link to the video recording will be shared with everyone. Any other questions regarding this module? You can feel free to raise your hand or and unmute to ask your question. Again, Joni, no takers on that, so let's proceed.
Okay, so in this section, we will be talking about contract management, inspections and testing. We're going to talk about renewals and amendments, as well as vendor protests and public record requests. So contract kickoff, it clarified terms is really, again, it is after the award has been made, and that's the initial meeting between, and it could be virtual or a telephone conference call or whatever, or it could be in person. So, that would be identified at that time, but it's a meeting between the end user and the vendor. So it could very well be the first time that they're coming together at that meeting. They're going to clarify terms and conditions. They're going to make sure everyone's on the same page with regard to goals and objectives. They're going to talk about roles and responsibility and make sure everyone's on the same page again with delivery expectations. Inspection and testing. That is, the state would notify the vendor if we receive damaged goods, if the order is inaccurate or there's a late shipment. We will be contacting the vendor with regard to that. In terms of delivery, we do not consider delivery to be complete if there is any type of disposable waste or debris that's left at the site. So the vendor is responsible, if it's applicable. Obviously, it's not going to be for everything, but if it is, then you will need to make sure that you leave the installation area clean and ready to use. Vendor complaints is really documented by the contract administrator. If it becomes a formal or a repetitive complaint and becomes a formal process, then they will contact the purchasing office and my staff, and we will do what we call a cure letter. And it becomes formal at that point, where we're going to identify the areas in which the vendor is deficient, and we need to see some instant improvement. And we want to communicate that in writing and get the vendor's response to the complaint. And at that point, it's a formal process. And so what we're looking for is a resolution and improvement. For renewals, that is, again, if there's a contract that's in place, renewals are optional and they do not have to be exercised. But again, most contracts these days are 1 year with 2 renewable year options attached to them. If it is renewed, obviously the vendor is going to get prior notification before the expiration date of the current contract. And then we will issue, obviously, a new purchase order that relates to that renewal. For amendments, again, that is used for a contract that's already in place with any needed changes on terms, the cost, the scope, or anything like that. And that really, contract amendments can only be done through the procurement office. So if there's a need for amendment, my office will get back involved, do the amendment, and then again release the collaboration between the end user and the vendor. Again, vendor protest. If you have, as a vendor, submitted a bid and you think that we, the procurement office, have not did what we said in the document that we can do. We did not award it. We did not evaluate it according to our stated intentions in the document. Then you have an opportunity to protest the award. It must be submitted within 30 consecutive days of the contract award. And it must pertain or contain specific reasons about and with supporting documentation about what did we not do right, right? What did we not get right? Um, and that is taken very serious by the state. So we do, if we get one, and this obviously over the $50,000, it'll go to the state purchasing office. If it's for NCDOT, they will contact me. Obviously, my staff will be the persons who would have awarded that contract, and then I would investigate what it is, that very specific reason that the vendor indicated that we did not do something right in, and then and if it's under the 50,000, it'll come straight to the purchasing director. And again, an investigation will be happening, and then a formal response will be given to the vendor that offered the protest. Public record request. So this is obviously any award that is any solicitation after the award, the information becomes public record at that point. And so you can request of the agency that offered who did the procurement award, you can submit a public records request and ask for information relating to that solicitation. If you want all the bid submissions that were provided, if you just want the awarded vendors information, so this is a great way if you're unsure about any particular thing, how I should respond, what the current contractor response was that won the bid. What I will caution you is, you should use it as reference information. Specifically, I'm referring to if you want to know the current contract, janitorial contract that was awarded for this building. If you ask for that information, we're obviously going to give it to you. Just because it was awarded at this price at one point, that does not necessarily mean that that's the award amount will be for the next one. So you need to use it as a reference, but also, not it may or may not be identical in terms of amount. That's what I'm trying to say. But this is a perfect way, the public records request is the perfect way to get information on if you're not sure how to do an RFP and you see one, once it has been awarded, you can request the information regarding that so that you can see the responses that we receive. You can see the evaluation and you can see the awarded vendors response as well. So it's a great way, it's a great tool. Again, some information may be redacted. They do have, other than cost, the state will honor a vendor's request for confidentiality information. However, as I stated earlier, we will be, prior to doing the initial review and information other than pricing is identified as confidential, we will send them a clarification letter to make sure they understand that this information is identified as confidential, and that we will, other than price, we will hold that confidentiality. But if that is challenged in court, then the vendor will have to step in and defend it. The state will not do so on their behalf. These are some quick websites for resources. Again, you're going to get a copy of this presentation. And Carla, that is the end of my session. So if there are any questions.
There are no questions in the chat, but if you would feel free to raise your hand and unmute and ask any question that you may have regarding the information that's been covered. Feel free to do that. Also, make note that we posted a link to a survey in the chat, and that link will also be emailed to you. But if you would take a few minutes to respond to our survey, we greatly appreciate it and we value your feedback. And again, at this time, if you'd like to raise your hand and ask a question, please do so. And I do see one question in the chat from Robert, who's wanting to know, are there bids for home care?
Again, I can't answer specific questions in regard to that. There may be, that would be something that I will also go to the Department of Human Health and Services for, specifically that comes to mind, but I am the procurement director for NCDOT. And so, but that does not mean that other agencies will not need your service. So I certainly would go out and see the bids that are posted. Again, work with the hub office and the training that's available for identifying the correct commodity codes so that you will be notified if something that is connected to that code is posted.
And I just want to remind that link for searching for commodity codes and how to do that has been posted in the chat. If you want to go back through the chat, that link is there. And so we have a hand raised.
Hey, Carla. I'm
Yes,
sorry.
Shay.
Before we
ahead.
go to the next one, I just wanted to also build on Joni's comment about DHHS, Health and Human Services, and that's absolutely the right place. You know, one of the challenges sometimes with the way that services are provided, just like was talked earlier, sometimes those are through prime contractors. So you're unlikely to see any direct solicitations for home care. You would typically go through some of the managed care organizations that are set up regionally across the state of North Carolina. So just wanted to add that.
Thank you, Shay.
Sure.
We now have hand raised Emilio or Lindell, if you want to go ahead with your question.
Good morning. My question is to you, what office do we check to find previous bids?
What office do you check to find previous bids? Is that your question?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, because
So, when a bid is posted, it states what agency is posting the bid. That is the agency that you would need to contact if, I'm assuming that the question is in regard to public records requests. So you would need to contact that agency. Different agencies handles public records requests differently. That just means that whether, I've been in other agencies in which the public records request will come straight to the procurement office, and I will handle it as the manager, provide the information straight. Here at NCDOT, the public records request goes through our communications department. So when you send in one, it goes to communications. Communications will send it to me. I gather the information, send it back to communications, and then communications send it to you. It's a seamless process, but again, agencies handle that differently. But you would need to contact the agency that posted the bid that you want a copy of, because they're the only ones that will have it. Along with the supporting documentation that goes with the bid.
Any other questions? Let's see. Check in the chat to see if we have any other questions in the chat, and we do not. Anybody else with a question, feel free to ask now. Seems we have no other questions. So Joni, on behalf of Director Alicia Lyon and the Hub team, thank you so much for your partnering with us for this presentation this morning. Thank you to our vendors that have taken the time out of their busy day to attend. And we appreciate all that has been put forth this morning. And this ends our session.